Welcome to another episode of A Life Worth Living.
What is the common thread that connects us all?
Sometimes we feel alone and we believe that we are the only person on earth who could possibly feel this way.
But maybe we all have more in common than we think.
So, we're asking for people's point of view to talk about their experiences in an attempt to better ourselves and find the common thread that connects us all. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Anaheim Stoneworks and Master Toddy LA Training Center. Sage, thank you for coming on. Welcome to our show.
Thank you so much. Thank you, both of you. I'm excited to be here.
No, appreciate you coming down, man. Definitely my new favorite artist. You know, looking at all these pieces and stuff, definitely added some color and added some beauty to the site as if it wasn't already colorful enough. So,
thank you.
Appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Like I said, we're going to be keeping some of this stuff. So sorry, you're going to be leaving a little bit empty-handed.
Well, you know, it makes me feel good that you enjoy it.
No,
Thank you.
We do. It's very beautiful, and I'm really happy to have it on the set right now. I'm glad you brought it. Yeah.
So you got a very amazing, compelling, story. You're a fellow person that is living a life worth living, obviously, and also suffered with addiction.
Yes.
You've been very public about that, and you've been able to express it through your art. And I want to talk a little bit about that in a minute. But so you grew up. I heard and read a little bit about that. You learned how to draw before you could actually write. Correct?
Yes. It was interesting. You know, I grew up in a time where I was alone a lot, so I found a lot of refuge and solace in my artwork. I would escape the noise of life. At least what I thought the noise of life was in drawing. Mm-hmm. So I started doodling when I was a child, and I used to get into a lot of trouble when I was a kid. Teachers hated the fact that I would sit there and draw, and they didn't understand that that's how I paid attention. And I had occasional instances where a teacher would chastise me for not paying attention, and I said, I would go through the drawings, and I said, well, when I did this, you were talking about the Revolutionary War.
Okay.
When we did this, we were civil rights over here. When I did this, you were talking about X,
Where
Y,
were
and Z.
you? And I needed you.
Yeah.
Right?
It was how I communicated. It was how I took notes. It was how I expressed. Even as a child, I still to this day have issues spelling.
What was their response back to that when you were able to do that?
They understood. The good teachers understood.
The good ones, yeah.
Yeah, the good ones understood and understood that's how I processed information.
The other ones were just blown away.
Yeah, the other ones were like, thought I was a smart aleck. Go to the principal's office. Get out of here, kid.
Yeah. Kind of, so leading into that, with your art, I mean, I want to touch on that more as well, but kind of going straight into the meat of things with your addiction, if you don't mind. Kind of wanted to open that up and to talk about that a little bit. What was your struggle? What was your drug of choice?
My drug of choice was crack cocaine for the majority of my addiction.
When did you start using that?
You know what's interesting? I grew up as a square kid. I was top A student, top 10 percentile of my class. I was prom king. I was, that kid, class president. And because my parents were both people who suffered with their own addiction, I hated drugs. I hated alcohol growing up. It wasn't until I hit my early 20s that I smoked my first cigarette, took my first drink, and it escalated from that point. And I'll remember my first drink was at Labor Day weekend in Washington, D.C., and it was Long Island iced teas.
No way.
Yeah.
Those are little devils.
6 of them.
So going back though real quick to your parents, were they alcoholics or addicts, a little bit of both?
Both, a little bit of both. My father, who's no longer with us, who was also a brilliant man, but extraordinarily broken. He passed away actually as a result of his addiction, I believe. My mom, who was going through her issues at the time of my birth, has cleaned up and been just a very supportive, nurturing, loving individual. But she had her struggles to go through. So I grew up watching the element of addiction firsthand. Mm-hmm. My relationship with my dad was so volatile because of his addiction. And what made it even worse was in 1984, he won $1 million. In 96, he died broke. We had to find money to bury him, and there were situations where I would walk into a situation where he was using, and again, my dad was an amazing artist, builder, athlete. He thought he could sing, but he wasn't really that good. But he knew he could. But
well, that's the interesting thing is most addicts and alcoholics are some of the most creative, intelligent, intellectual people I've ever met in my life.
The absolute brilliance. Some of the most brilliant people that I've met in my life have been in crack houses.
Well, I mean, look at around us. I mean, this is unbelievable.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you think that maybe you are channeling some, like the energy that you're channeling into your art right now, that for a moment in time you were channeling that into the addiction?
Yeah.
Like one was kind of replacing the other?
Well, I think with my addiction it was based on, yes, to answer the question succinctly, yes. And to expound upon that, my addiction was a spiritual element.
You had a spiritual void?
I had a spiritual void.
Yeah.
That I could not fill, or in many cases I didn't understand or could identify. And it was through that, after the 21-year-old 6 Long Island iced teas and the addiction caught on. And because I was so venomously against addiction, I didn't know, walking into my addiction, I didn't know, for instance, that I was smoking crack for 3 months.
What do you mean you didn't know? Like you just didn't realize?
The people who introduced me to that particular drug told me it wasn't crack. What was interesting was my perception of a crack addict at that time was the dirty, nasty, smelly person on the street. Yeah. The person that I would in less than a year become. The people who
so it took one year from the day
it was to the day.
So you smoked that at
July 9th, 1991.
And you were 21?
21. July 19th, 92 is when my mom finally sent me to my first rehab.
So you became, within 1 year, became homeless. The guy that you...
3 jobs.
That's crazy.
My own place in Brooklyn. All of it. In 365 days, gone.
And that's how fast it can happen, I think, and that's something we can totally relate to.
It was the consumption of it, but that came from that spiritual void, that emptiness, and which was interesting because I like I said, I grew up with certain insecurities. I grew up with hearing, "You look just like your father," which I look just like my father. There was no denying this is my dad.
And was that?
But because of the relationship, our relationship, I heard you're ugly. So I grew up with those insecurities all of my life. So by the time I was introduced to the actual substance, the addiction had already been seeded.
So to you, people telling you that you look just like your father was not good.
It was
like
good,
a bad, you're like, please,
So that just played into a domino effect of a long, so you, at 21, then to 22, you went to your first treatment center.
Yes.
And did you obtain sobriety through that mission, or was that just a quick stop?
It was a quick stop. I wanted to obtain that sobriety. I wanted to begin the path of spiritual healing, self-confidence. I wanted to experience that joy, that euphoria that drugs initially have brought to me, but then betrayed.
Well, yeah, because at first it's fun, and then it becomes, it's a great way to, to go get out there and have fun. Then it becomes a way of living. Then before you know it, it's a way of survival.
Yeah. Well, I think also what you're saying, that on the inside you didn't feel good. There was a spiritual void, and you thought you were fat and ugly. Yeah. I think so many of us in society go through that. Like, it's not so much that's the unique. It's like what makes it unique is how you completely unraveled in such a short amount of time. And I think a lot of us still do that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm an overachiever.
Exactly. No, that's what's super interesting is that you were an overachiever, but you unraveled. I mean, I had a very similar situation. Thank God I didn't end up homeless. Yeah. But I think these are issues that everybody deals with.
Which they are, and I think right now with a lot of my artwork, with my photography specifically, I try to make those connections that we're not all that different.
We're not.
We're not really all that different, and a lot of my work is I wear different hats when I create in different genres. With the photography, I do mostly documentary style photography, and we have the Cracks series. We have the Matthews 25.
Talk about the Cracks series real quick. It is unbelievable.
Cracks series was an interesting phenomenon for me to experience in a challenge. I had relapsed after 11 years of sobriety. And in that relapse, it was that first time, it was in January, and it was devastating. Because even after 11 years of sobriety, that one instance took me exactly back to the ugliest of my addiction prior to becoming sober. And it was fascinating because I thought, after 11 years, I'm transformed. I'm a new person. My spirit I've worked on these issues, and my spirit has changed. And in many regards, I had changed. In many regards, I showered on a regular basis now. I had a car now. I paid bills and credit cards, and those.
Do you understand that though?
Tough time though, but this is what I'm curious about. Why did you relapse? Was there something going on?
There were a lot of things going on. I stopped doing the things that initially kept me sober.
So you weren't doing like the maintenance.
You
thought you were too good already. You had it all figured
out. I
transformed.
I've changed.
The ego came into play again, and
exactly.
and that's I think something to touch on though. But it's something that we can probably identify with. But for you, is when somebody goes into a relapse. Even when you're sober,
I relapsed from an eating disorder. I know what it's like.
But the longevity though of not using for 11 years, his disease is still doing push-ups the whole time. So when he came back, it took off worse than where it started. So I think that's.
And so what this Cracks series is, and on the guttural level, it was a document of my experience. On a broader artistic level, what I wanted to do was, because I have been homeless and have had my humanity stripped away from me based upon a perception of what an addict is or was. I think people have a lot of misconceptions of how much pain and solitude and isolation is involved in that. And what I wanted to do was capture moments of truth with an individual. And I approached Baby D is his name, with the concept of what I wanted to do. He understood what I wanted to do, which was bring his truth, but more importantly, his humanity onto film. We got a hotel room. He had his substance. We entered the room, which ironically, I didn't capture this, I didn't get it until after, when I was editing, was the room number was 101, which was funny. It was like, lesson 101, here we go.
I know.
Fasten your seatbelts. And I told him, I was like, listen, I'm not here anymore. I'm invisible, and I just try to become as invisible as possible. And this guy granted me just an amazing access to his truth. And why he was important is because if you look at the photographs tonight, this is a good-looking, barrel buff. Well-built guy.
Good looking.
He's accessible, because I didn't want to get the person that people look at and say, oh, well, they're a drug addict because they looked
where
like
you
a
were
drug
at
addict.
21.
Exactly.
I mean, when you look at this guy, he looks so well put together, and you would never judge that.
Yeah.
It's like we always say, though, the disease doesn't discriminate.
Yeah. He would look like me.
Yeah.
He would look like you. He would look like an actor on TV.
Yeah.
What's interesting about him, several things. One was he very intelligent, charismatic guy with a great sense of humor.
What do you do for a living?
Me?
No, what did he do?
He was on the street.
Oh, so he was on he was on the street when you took him in. Okay, got it.
Yes.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. But he was brilliant. We shot approximately 45 minutes. I started to personally feel uncomfortable. The smells and sounds, the effects became uncomfortable, but then it also became redundant, because with that particular substance, you're doing almost in repetition the exact same thing.
Over.
So I think we captured what I wanted to show, what I wanted to say artistically. And like I said, I don't edit much. I don't do Photoshop. I don't know how to do that. I try to capture the picture and get the picture. And afterwards, I drove back to the location where he was, and I showed him the photographs, and he sat in my car and he wept. And I was taken by that. I don't think he saw himself as the pictures show him.
Well, there was one photo in particular that that we talked about, and I noticed where there's actually, he took a picture in the mirror.
Yes.
And he can't even see his own reflection.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure.
No, I mean, like, literally.
Yeah.
It's so crazy.
Yeah. That was his signature photograph.
What was the whole, for you, what was the whole point of creating that concept?
I think we too often, people in general too often put people in little boxes so that they could understand.
I always say that.
And consume that.
Did you see a lot of yourself, though?
I saw all of myself. I'm sorry.
No, it's kind of what I wanted to point out.
I saw all of myself. I wept when I was editing because there's one photograph of him lying on the bed, and there's just darkness behind him. And that was me, the isolation, the desperation, the loneliness of addiction. Mm-hmm. For me was just, it was monumental. It was so powerful. It was tangible, my grief of myself. It was literally something that envelops me. And that series kind of captures that. I see me in each of those photographs. The final photograph where he's looking out of the window, it took me to the hours that I would be looking out of a peephole or under a door, you hear.
Well, it brings us back to like working with the newcomer. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole purpose of working that program and being able to, to identify and see where you don't want to go again.
Yeah.
Has this also been a part of your healing? Because the way you're describing it sounds very deep for you and very spiritual.
It's a huge part of healing. One, the recognition of that, yes, this exists. This exists within me, potentially. But
and revisiting that painful moment, I think, is what a lot of people try to run away from. Yeah. But they should actually go towards it.
I, in many regards, embrace a lot of it. Again, having an addiction does not dehumanize you. It doesn't take away your humanity. I did some things I'm not particularly proud of or wouldn't, post on the newspaper, but that was the addiction. I was still a good guy in my heart. I'm still, not a bad person. I had a bad disease.
Yeah, and and that's the thing too. I think is important that we take accountability for our actions. We're not justifying it. We're not saying it's okay. Yeah. But that doesn't take away who we are as a person.
Exactly. And that goes into the healing process of, okay, this exists, yes, but there's also a solution. And then when I'm looking at the problem, to this day when I look at that series, I am in each frame reminded that this exists, but there is a solution, that I today don't have to live that way. And having so much time sober and then painting again, and it was really dark, ugly stuff.
Reflecting maybe where you were at
currently? It was the regurgitation of where I was at.
How long ago was that?
Over a year and a half.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, February 25th was my anniversary.
Congratulations.
That's
awesome.
So that was that prior December. That December, I started getting honest with myself. And I had to, because the reality was this. I said, if I go on one more run, I knew where to get a handful of Oxycontin and a fifth of vodka. And I knew where I can go where they wouldn't find my body until it started to smell. And I would have all of the appropriate documents and stuff, my license, so that they could contact next of kin and stuff. And I was seriously, because that pain had swelled to a point where I could no longer function, think, feel. It was just pain. Yeah. It was the pain of lying to my friends, lying to my job, the pain of lying to myself. Feeling worthless. The inability to not use. The inability to not use, to get off of work and go and get in my car and get on the freeway, telling myself, you're going to go home, you're going to go home, you're going to go home, you're going to go home. And finding yourself at the dealer. Not knowing how I got there. Or being exhausted and going to bed at 12 and jolted awake at 4 and automatically in my car to the dealer. And not having the ability to not do that was enough. I was like, my disease was doing push-ups all this time and it's kicking my behind right now and I can't.
So how would you describe that? I mean, because I totally understand, and I think Sophia knows definitely what you're saying, just with the reality of addiction as it is a disease and the insanity behind that, where it is almost, it's really hard to express to somebody that doesn't have or suffer from addiction. In your terms, how would you express the difference between the lack of knowledge on, understanding the disease, for somebody to say, oh, it's a moral issue, versus it's something that is really centered in the brain and is a disease?
I would say try to stop breathing. Try to stop breathing. Your body has to breathe. It needs air. You cannot not breathe. You have to breathe. Try to stop breathing.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Way to describe that.
Everything you just said to me totally makes sense. It's like you have to have it.
You have to have it. And there's nothing more important. Your job, your family, your friends. And the moral element comes into play, I think, when you start missing work, or you start telling lies, or in cases when you start stealing from your kids' trust fund or piggy bank, or whatever it is, the actions that you're compelled to do.
Well, when you start getting into that vicious cycle of doing those behaviors, that's kind of to elaborate on what you were saying about how you get the drink or the drug in your hand before you even have it. I mean, what I notice is the behaviors, when you see someone start slipping away, they're not necessarily using, that's where the dry drunk or the dry alcoholic comes into play. And when they're in that form of doing those actions, it's like that's where you got to catch them before they actually have the substance, because you'll be at a spot where you're drinking or drugging before you even know it.
And you no longer become yourself. You lose. In my situation, I lost a lot of who I was. The core of me remained the same, but just the sense of pride or dignity it vanished instantaneously. But it again goes back to that healing element. When you ask about the art and the expression of that, to come back to that, yes. Oh, yes. Because for so long I had denied feeling, stuffed things and repressed things. With my art, particularly with the painting, it's just raw. It's just all over the canvas, my body, the clothes, everything.
Well, you're actually feeling now.
Yeah, and it's a physical, guttural, visceral experience, and it's healing. And what really transformed was a situation at work where somebody was really, really, genuinely messing with me. And I was so stressed out to the point where I could not stand up. I could not stand. The stress had me bent over, my back had given out. And the next day I went and I prayed and meditated, and when I would come home from work, I'd paint. I'd paint and cuss and scream.
Is that your form of serenity almost? I mean, just to be able to
just
get out.
He's in flow when he paints.
Yeah.
You're describing flow right now.
Because there's none of this was, you don't think, I don't think about, well, today I'm going to paint a woman with an orange and stuff. It becomes this, I take the canvas, I smell the canvas, I put it on the easel, and then I go into the spiritual conversation, and I become removed. People ask me all the time, well, how long does it take you to paint this? I'm like, I have no idea.
You just described flow 100%. That's just like, It's and supposedly if people, well, what we found is that people who are in flow more often are happier, they're thriving, they're flourishing, and you found that through art. Yeah.
You can tell that through your pieces, though. I mean, there's 3 pieces here right now, and they're so different. And I mean, they're amazing. I mean, we were talking about what's the favorite one when you came in here. I mean, obviously you can draw attention to the one you love most, but you can just see how much emotion goes into it. I mean, just your presence, your energy. I mean, it's just amazing to see how far you've come. Thank you. Just really appreciate and admire the fact that you're here to be able to express this and share this and to show your journey. You know, it's to me, it's very moving and inspirational. I mean, there's a lot of. By this, I feel like we almost had a little meeting, you know what I mean?
I know, right?
And seriously,
this is good.
And, you know, just I really, you know, anything we can do to support you, you know, I really want to do that.
Being here, a life worth living is amazing. Being here is, and you said earlier about sharing my story. I think that's where the healing is, a large part of the healing.
Man, appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on.
Absolute pleasure.
Really do.
You have a wonderful story. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You'll be coming back down here a lot more, man.
Yes, I will.
Hey guys, thank you for listening. You can go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Check us out at A Life Worth Living podcast. We're on iTunes and Stitcher. And do you want to tell them where they can find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at WallerJason or on Instagram at Jason Waller. And your social media feeds?
All my handles are Sophia Silva org, so follow us.
Kept it real. Follow us. Take care, you guys.
Let us know in the comments below how you make life worth living. We're sure you have lots of great tips to share, and by working together, we can all thrive. I have it memorized.
She's good. I think that's going to be good. One more time. Let's do it again.
This is how you guys look.
The speed needs to be a little bit faster. Can you make it a little bit faster? Yeah.
No, I think it's better that way because I need to be able to handle it. We'd like to thank Anaheim Stone for making this show possible. Nothing says luxury like enhancing your surroundings with natural quality stone.
Master Toddy LA Training Center offers authentic Muay Thai training with locations in Bangkok, Pomona, and Anaheim. For more information, visit mastertoddyla.com.